Jack, welcome to Off Track. How are
Thank
you?
you.
Lovely to see you.
Very well. Very well, thank you. Welcome to Merseyside. Welcome to Vale Park.
It's beautiful out there. What a beautiful drive across. I've been under the tunnel through the city, and then you pop up on this side, and
Yeah.
it's absolutely glorious. How have you been, mate? It's nice to see you.
We've been pretty well, thank you. Very well.
What have you been up to while we've not had you on our BSB screens?
Doing motocross Grand Prix for Eurosport has been the usual state of play for the last couple. This is the third year, actually. Yeah, this is the third year. I mean, I used to do them way back, and,
Yes.
and I was always doing them at times during World Supers and BSB. But it's a kind of reversion to type, really.
But that's where you
set out from.
Yeah, that's where you started, wasn't it? On the motocross side of things, on the dirt before moving. What was the transition from motocross to the short circuits? How did that come about?
It was when Eurosport got the World Superbike gig, and Simon Reed decided. I'd been working for Eurosport probably about 6 or 7 years at that point, on and off, just kind of, there was nothing constant going on really. And then suddenly he said, do you want to do World Superbikes next year? This was at the end of 97. And I thought, yeah, actually, I'd like to do that, because I'd always kept an eye on the road racing stuff. And so that's how it started.
Who did you start with? Did you start straight away with Whit, or did he come later?
No, he came later.
He came later, didn't he?
I started doing some stuff with the Parishioner, but he was doing European trucks with Mercedes at the time. So he would have some weekends where he wasn't available. He was out racing the Mercedes, spinning it when he needed to, so as to bring out a red flag and start the race again. And there was a guy called Mark Bullen who Simon had found, who stepped in when he wasn't around. And that was we did a couple of years of that. And then I did a year with, good heavens above, I've forgotten his name. I did a year with a former 125 racer. And then I did 2 years with, I can't remember that guy's name. Isn't that dreadful?
No, I'm trying to think as well.
And it'll come
to you at some point.
It'll come back to me in time. Dreadful, that is. My apologies to you.
We'll come back to that one.
And then I did, and at the end of that 2000, that was Y2K, at the end of that year, Chris Herring said to me, who's Castrol Honda's World Superbike PR lad, and a fellow Teessider, he said the old Trout was packing in. Neil Mackenzie was stopping, so why don't you ask him? So we did, and he came on for 2 years. I did 2001 and 2 with him.
Yes.
And then Whitham would join us in the comment. There were people who would come and be a third voice in the comms now and then, which was fun, always the case. And Whit was one of them. If he had a bad World Super Sport race, he generally wouldn't show up. If he had a decent World Super Sport result, he would show up. And he took over at the end of, when he retired himself at the end of 2002.
That's it.
He took over then. He was with us at Imola on that dramatic finale to 2002 between Bayliss and Edwards, and Mackenzie. I can't believe it as I say it. He had to go early to catch a flight, so he left 3/4 of the way through the championship decider. Neil left and waved us goodbye. Simon said we did that all wrong. We made it far too public. And, have a good flight, mate. All the best. And then I was in there with Whitham.
We're just about to watch history.
And then he stepped in. He was packing in then because he had a bit of eyesight issues and stuff that were going to bother him. So, he stepped in then, and gosh, and that was it. We were together from there on.
For getting on 20 years.
Yes, because till late 2021. Yeah. Yes, it was getting on 20
short
years.
20 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time to spend with Whit.
No, it's a wonderful time. You never spend too long with Whitham.
You don't. I agree completely.
He is such a lovely character.
I agree completely. We have him on the show just once a year, just to preview the BSB season.
Yes.
But we sit and chat regularly at BSB and drop messages occasionally through the week. And there's nobody else you'd rather be trapped in a lift with.
Yes, exactly. or in an airport with, on an aeroplane with. on a road trip in a hire car with, and in the commentary box with. Yeah.
How long did it take you to develop the relationship with Whit? Because you watch over the years, and the chemistry, it takes time to build chemistry between a lead and a colour.
I've no idea.
You just drop straight into it.
Well, I mean, you probably know, but if you listened to 2003, you'd probably get more of an idea than I would ever remember.
Yeah, that's true.
What we were doing in 2003, Neil Hodgson won the championship from Rubens House, and that was when people were just a bit down on World Superbike, saying, "Oh, it's lost its characters. Really, Bayliss has moved on, Edwards has moved on," and you know what I mean. It was, but I was just always a great fan and supporter of it, so I just beefed it up for all I was worth. So I mean, we just really enjoyed. That was when we had stuff to do. Like there was a good super stock Thou, which was a smashing series that was foolishly got rid of by either Dorner or the Flamini brothers, whoever it was. Well, that was a great series. So that would sort of kick the day off. And after we'd done Super Pole or whatever the hell was going on the Saturday. So, but generally, that and Super Sport, and it wasn't a great load of work. It was a good balance of work. Whereas in British Superbikes, there was quite a lot to deal with, quite a lot of support classes to go through. And at one time, I was pretty much doing all of them. Just the first year when I did it for ITV, that was really clean as a whistle. The only ones we did were the actual Superbike races.
Oh, that's not too bad.
That was in 2007. And then 2008 when Eurosport took over, and then everything got thrown down the chute at us.
I don't think I could ever be a commentator. I don't.
But you seem to talk extremely well. I don't think that's the case. I think anybody can be a commentator.
I think the live TV thing is it's very difficult. When I've done it once, I had one shift in the comms box at Alton Park with Greg Haynes, covering Motostar. Yeah. In the beginning of 2019. It was on the Sunday because Neil was flying back from Red Bull Rookies. So he wasn't on till the Monday. So they wanted somebody to sit alongside Greg. Greg recommended me, and sadly I've never been back. So that maybe tells you. In 5 years I was never invited back. But yeah, it's not easy, but I suppose it's like anything with practice and with experience. It kind of does come to you a little bit.
Never had any practice. I was just sent over to Paris to do a 3-hour sand race, a beach race. No, that was the second one. The first one was a supercross from Finland, but it was just kind of, I'd never done anything like that before. Oh, Alec Wright at Kawasaki UK did. Yes. He had me voicing over their winning season in the British Motocross Championship in 1991. And that was the first bit of anything like that I'd done. So yeah, there wasn't any. I'd get the occasional little bit of advice, but very, 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 very little, really.
Really?
Respond. No, you were just in at the deep end and expected to swim, really.
Here you go. This is what you got. Here's your microphone. And here's your headset.
Yeah,
there's the action.
And in fact, it was quite a long while before Simon himself started to drop a few more nuggets in my direction. I'd just ask a bit more of, particularly when I moved onto British Superbikes as well. And I was thinking, oh, that's quite interesting. I started to get more feedback then, which we hadn't had really. Me and Whit were just flying by our backsides. We hadn't got that much idea what was going on. We'd have on site at World Superbikes, the team were all Italians who spoke very, very little English, if any, and were just kind of flapping around us, sorting out all these enormous cables, and it was ridiculous. You never quite knew whether things were going to work or not.
One thing that I have noticed over the years, especially the more recent years, is how commentary has changed in terms of how jokey you can be, what you can say, what you can't say. I was looking through YouTube last night, and there's a couple of snippets of you and Whit, and it's proper, for me, motorcycle commentary. There was what's Marco Melandri's wife, Manuel?
Oh Lord, no.
I'll have 3 bags of washies. But things like that. But it's only what we're all thinking. And she is taller than Marco. You're absolutely right.
By a considerable
margin.
Yeah.
But things these days seem to be. It feels. There's times where you're expecting something to be said and then it's not, and they're too quick to apologize for something because there might be a minority that's offended, or other things are available. No, but we know what you mean. You're kind of taking the sting out of what would be entertainment, because was it Greg that told me this? It was Fred Clark. The job as a commentator is to inform and to entertain.
Yes. Yeah.
The entertain bit is getting less and less. Would you agree?
There is a danger of that, I think, yeah. When I was, a few years ago, when I was required to start stipulating colours more and numbers and constantly being reminded of it on air through my headset, kind of colours jack, and then people started taking the piss out of me about green Kawasaki's and things. I mean, it was inevitable within the paddock. It was inevitable that kind of thing would happen. And you just think, yeah. Well, that's what I'm required to do.
Yes, that's what I've been asked. It's sort of catering for the minority in a lot of ways, isn't it? But I'm sure you found the same as I do, that the watching audience generally is fairly well clued up on what they're watching.
Yeah, but they were always looking to, as particularly as Discovery became involved, it was that assumption that there'd be other people wanting to watch this, people who had no idea and just happened to have tuned in by accident, really, and thought, oh, this looks quite good, have a look at this, and they needed informing.
The 1% of the audience that may be tuned in. I can say that. I'm the host of this show. I'm not contracted to anybody, so it's all right. But it kind of feels a bit like that, doesn't it? So how much did it change for you over the 20 years at Eurosport with Whit mainly?
It never changed at all. We just got on really good. We just got on very, very well from the outset. And we had quite a few shared interests. Like, he loved his off-road stuff. And when we went abroad, I would constantly be working on my next magazine feature at the same time. So I'd have some old copies of Dirt Bike Rider with me and stuff like that. And we'd pick stuff up at the airports, and he'd have his flying mags and things like that. And we'd the two of us were like a couple of children, kind of swapping magazines and looking at stuff. And it was just really, really enjoyable to travel with him wherever you were. In fact, there was one very memorable occasion when the first time we flew to Lyon, which was Roger Burnett's suggestion to get to Magny-Cours instead of the horrors of the Périphérique and all that, and which was particularly bad on a Sunday night. So we flew to Lyon, and typical, we were just kind of chatting away and set off to the north and just kept going north until we realised the signposts were telling us we were this far from Paris. Paris? What? Hang on, what's all this about? So we had to swiftly stop at the next service station, buy ourselves a map, and start fathoming out where the hell we were and where we needed to get to. And we were actually almost directly east of Magny-Cours. We had a long journey across the middle of the country to get to where it was. And that was beautiful. That was like, I remember Whit saying, this is rush hour, this is. It was like 5:30 and there wasn't another car on the road, and we were dawdling along this lovely road. We were climbing up to kind of mountaintop medieval villages and things and dropping out. It was an amazing run, really lovely, and it was all because we'd completely cocked up the journey that we did that. And it was lovely. Yeah, all roads lead to Paris, whether you want them to or not. And Whit was saying, I'm going to move here. If this is rush hour, I think I want to live around here.
It's not exactly busy on Crosland Moor Airfield at 5:30, is it? He's in a great place. In a great place up there.
Yeah, that's very true. He's very true.
He's man and boy up there, isn't it? What do you as you think back to the World Superbike at this point, the World Superbike days with Whit? What are your favourite memories as you look back?
do you know what? One of the best things about it was there wasn't any there weren't any on-site trucks or anything fancy like that. So our commentary positions were in all sorts of nutty places, and some of which were really good, and some of which perhaps weren't so good. I remember the kind of the Nissan huts on the opposite side of the main straight from the pit garages at Misano were boy, on a day like this, you'd absolutely die in them. You'd be boiling hot. You'd just have to be stripped off and perspiring heavily. You know, it was, it was. That wasn't entirely satisfactory. It didn't feel that great, or not with the weather there anyway. Although the sight of Yukio Kageyama bucking and weaving round that long series of turns when it was running the other way round, when it ran anti-clockwise, and he was gathering speed as he lost control. Oh, it was amazing to watch. But that was one of the less satisfactory ones. But somewhere like the old 1939 grandstand at Monza, the beautiful Art Deco structure, we were right at the top of there, right at the top, and the only thing above us was that beautiful kind of glass. What would you call a great curved bay window at the top, which is where the timekeepers were originally installed, but it wasn't being used then except by an Italian television company who used it as a studio a couple of times. So we could go in there, we ventured up into there, and you could climb through the windows onto the roof, and you had the Alps in the distance to your left. And the sound of Max Biaggi and the RSV4 Aprilia going past you at 200 miles an hour, and the whole lot at Monza, everything's enclosed. The noise is just enclosed between grandstands on both sides, and it made a fabulous racket.
And the history of Monza as well, the old circuit
for
and
me,
the banking
the old to send a former car-mad youth to places like Monza and the Nürburgring was just bloody marvellous. Imola, and you could, for me, those kind of tracks have it all, really. Even the places like Magny-Cours do. They're more not quite as keen on the more modern stuff. It didn't interest you quite as much. Have you noticed that the best finishers to any races have huge hooning last turns? They don't have little narky chicanes or anything like that. They have massive, bloody balls-out turns that at Phillip Island, at the Parabolica at Monza, clearways at Brands, just huge hooning bends are the way to create fantastic finishes. Absolutely. That's why places like Monza and Phillip Island, their whole history is riddled with them, or was in the case of Monza, because sadly we lost it after, I think it was 2013, when there was a lot of rain and there was some quite unpleasant accidents, including to Alicia Polita, bless her, who was Sandoz Polita, kid sister, and she crashed at the Ascari chicane, and the red flags came out. And the place was, it was really inclement, unexpected weather, and probably we didn't really go back there after that. But I think the problem that had arisen at Monza was Formula One's insistence on rejigging that first turn at the end of the main straight. Yeah, that was really horrible for motorbikes. That was a really horrible.
Were really high as well, weren't they? It just didn't work at all.
It was just the whole having to brake from a ridiculous speed to zero. It was horrible. Whereas the original few years we were there, when it just had a double switch.
Yeah.
And into the Curva Grand. That was fabulously spectacular. Equally dangerous, but fabulously spectacular.
But a little easier for the motorcycles than 290-degree bends that are there now.
And that's where poor Max Neukirchner's career was pretty much finished there, when he got T-boned when he led into that as who was it who lost control, got on the grass, lost control of his Ducati and took him down. But anyway, his injuries were really extensive, and he never really came back well from that.
How did you deal with the darker side of the sport as a commentary team? Because it says on the ticket, motorsport's dangerous. Yeah. And we know we have the good times, but sometimes, as is all too well documented, and as we both know personally, it has its darker days.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that from a commentary perspective, as you and Whit did and had to do on a handful of occasions?
You know, we were blessedly fortunate, really. It rarely happened to us. With people that we knew, it really happened to us. You know, there was a South African lad who got wiped out at Kyalami, but he was a kind of wild card. We didn't know him. There was... Who was the guy? There was a World Super Sport guy who got killed at Monza on braking at the end of the main straight, and again he was a guy that we didn't know. That was the first year that I was doing World Supers, and we didn't know the guy. It happened in practice, and so that makes a difference, I think.
Yes.
I can remember when the wonderful Craig Jones lost his life at Brands Hatch, that in World Supersport, that Whit was convinced that had been a bad accident. And of course, at the time on air, you don't really know. And he suddenly got really subdued at that point. He really felt that things had gone wrong. So yeah, you have to... I don't know how you handle it, really. The thing is that you don't really know what's happened fully until afterwards.
Yes.
So that to a degree is you've got to keep an optimistic frame of mind, haven't you? So to a degree, that's what you do. And
it just interested me because we're all human.
Yeah.
And we become friends with riders, teams, and
yeah. Oh, when I got the news just via a text that Chrissy Rouse had died, and I was in the kitchen, and my autistic lad was the only other person in there, and I was absolutely derelict. I was just so upset, and I'm getting upset now. And Ludo, bless, he just kept saying, "Daddy, cry, Daddy, cry." I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, mate." I couldn't explain to him really, but that was just awful. It was just awful. I just always believed he would kind of be all right, you know. Which we do. We do. But, fortunately, I wasn't commentating that one. Because, of course, I'd had him and Dom around here a couple of times. And, you know, it was he was just an outstanding human being in every way. Amazing fella.
I agree. We were lucky to be good friends with Chrissy, and
we were lucky to have him.
Yeah,
we were
absolutely.
Lucky to have him. Yeah, we did. Yeah,
absolutely. And and I said this on the podcast not so long ago. One of my biggest regrets is he didn't know that we were doing this. I never got to share it with him.
Yes,
because we'd agreed to. It was only that weekend that we'd put things in place that we were going to go, right, we're going to take off track. I was doing it as a hobby before, and we're going to go and we're going to do video, and let's just see how we get on. And I know 100% he'd have been behind me all the way.
Yes.
And it was just, the tears were shed, no question. Bless him. And that's why we carry the logo. As we've explained, but the logo that we have is a bell helmet with 2 pink stripes.
Oh, right.
One pink stripe for Chrissy and one for Keith Farmer.
Yes.
He was a great friend of ours as well. Yeah. So that's how our logo came about. But tell me the good things about World Superbike with Whit when you, from the commentary box perspective, because he is such a great character, and you two worked so well together over the years.
And I think I look back and I'm not terribly chuffed with the way I behaved at times. I could get a bit annoyed at times. I could get a bit, I misbehaved at times. I do remember losing the passes off the top of the car when we moved the car from one spot to another behind that concrete grandstand I mentioned at Monza. And so the guy, the jobs with on the pit gate wouldn't let us through, and I just eventually pushed him aside and ran. And I got into, I was just furious, and I got into a fair bit of trouble for that from the press lady for that. At Imola, we were at the back of the concrete grandstand on the left of the start straight, and that was lovely. And at both Monza and Imola, you had to jostle your way through pedestrian tunnels crammed in with fevered Italians. I mean, it was a real experience just getting to work, if you like. And then you'd come out the other end, and at Imola, at Monza, you'd have to go, I count 4 or 5 stories to get to your commentary point. And I never used to leave quite enough time. And at Imola, we were just one set of steps up the back and then into the top of this concrete grandstand. And we did have a few Italians there who were trying to watch our screen. They were kind of standing up in front of us and looking around and things like that. And I got really knocked with them. And Whitham for him, he was petrified. He was thinking, we're going to get found out here. We're going to get laid into when we come out. Because the guys started getting really angry.
Wow. It's a difficult situation to come back.
And we had to carry on commentary. I think, I don't know, you've got to know, I had no knowledge of which hand gestures offended Italians, but there was obviously one hand gesture that really offended Italians.
It's for me, it is one of the best commentary double acts that there been, and people don't forget.
Well, you do. What Whitham spectacularly excels at is he very rarely repeats himself. The stuff that used to double me up in the commentary box was all new. It was always new. He always had new expressions and phrases and ways of addressing stuff that completely cracked me up.
New material every week.
It got new material every week, and this would be in normal everyday life as well, and travelling and the whole lot, as well as actually being on air.
Did he ever leave you?
Oh, he did.
Doubled up so you couldn't speak.
Yes,
through laughing.
Yes, that, and some people said I was putting the laughter on. That was never the case. Absolutely never. There was one occasion when he abandoned me when we used to deal directly with Paris. The Eurosport was French owned in what we now regard as the halcyon days, really, to be honest. And at Brands Hatch, we'd done Superpole on the Saturday, and then first thing on the Sunday morning, we were having to voice over a kind of 20-minute edit of Superpole. And someone had pulled a very large plug out somewhere in Brands Hatch. We found this out a lot later.
Oh.
All the electricity had been kind of switched off. Our screens just disappeared. And so this was as we'd started Superpole. And I remember him just the headphones off, crash, and stomped out. And that was the last I saw of him. And I did that Superpole commentary on noise. I never had a picture. I just you had a nice little variety of engine noises and things. And so just recalling who was doing what and what bike they were on, I kind of fumbled my way through, really. And of course, the people in Paris, they were never that bothered. That bothered. There was no one hanging on to your every word or giving you any feedback, so it really didn't matter that much. And then also at Brands Hatch, we were right at you commentate from right at the top of that lovely main grandstand.
Yes, you're outside before
you drop in. So that's another underground job to get there. And you drop into where they drop into Paddock Hill. You're looking down there. But you're in those kind of furnaces of kind of greenhouses that are perched right on the top of the roof. Virtually, you're as high up as you can get. They're south facing. You've got a lot of sun coming in.
South facing commentary boxes, not what you need. Sun blazing in at your face, trying to watch.
One of the best ones, Magny-Cours is one of the best ones. You're right over the garages. You're high up, admittedly, so there's quite a lot of legging it upstairs, but you're over the top of the garages and you see them on the actually through your forward-facing window to keep you quite shaded, and you see them come plummeting down towards that final right-hander and chicane and onto the main straight, and that's a good spot to be.
Did you get a chance to sort of exercise your journalistic side as well, with getting to know the teams, getting to know the managers, getting to know team owners and things like that, and kind of trying to bring out more information, because you do your research before a weekend, but there's nothing like doing research on a weekend and having up-to-date news.
Yeah, but that was an enormous advantage to just be a known face. You could just dive into any garages around and get a bit of quick information on just what had happened or what had been done between races or stuff like that all the time. I mean, for some reason, Eugene Laverty pops into my mind as a really calm bloke. You could nip into the garage and have a quick word with him, literally before he went out on the bike. And he was perfectly relaxed and at ease and willing to have, just give you whatever you needed to know.
It was a good time to be.
He did used to say once when we were in an airport, he did say, I never panic.
He's still the same now. I saw him at the Northwest 200 and he's just as laid back as ever. Just quite happy with his lot.
Yes.
He's a very composed and very comfortable.
I'll tell you who I went down to see at the who I've always really adored, Tolsland before. And that was at Magny-Cours as well. That was at Magny-Cours. He was about to go out for the final race of the series at Magny-Cours in 2007 on the that lovely green and white Honda. And I just wanted to wish him all the best. And because I was directly above there, I could leave it till the last minute to nip down and have a quick word. And he just gave me a big hug, big hug. It was really lovely. We had a real hug, and then he stepped on the bike and away he went, and he did nail the championship. It was great. Which was actually the same place. I'd forgotten it was the same place he finished 2004 against Laconia.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yeah, same venue, same finish.
Yeah.
Half a point, I think. Was it Laconia?
No, it wasn't.
Was it quite that close?
Tight. That half point was Biaggi versus Tom Sykes in 2013.
That was it at Magny-Cours.
At Magny-Cours. I remember Tom just looking round as he crossed the line, and he could see Biaggi come through that last chicane, and he knew he'd not quite made it. Because it was Magny-Cours where Laconia was racing round the paddock, showering people with a huge flagon of champagne and stuff, chasing Tolson. This was quite later on at night when people were well oiled and all sorts of stuff was going on. Actually, the best paddock to be in after a championship had finished was probably 2002 at Imola, because there were four bands in that. It's a big paddock, and there were four bands going on. Tolsland's band was on, the Alstara Suzuki guys had one going on, there were two more, and there was endless supplies of Alstara Corona beer, and it was just a mental night that just went on and on and on. And I was supposed to be flying out at like 7 o'clock in the morning with our production lady, Ren Hiscott, and she was Charlie's sister.
Indeed.
Lovely woman. And how on earth she got us to the airport, I've no idea, because we just got back to the hotel and had time to have a quick shower to try and waken up a bit. And then we were off. And all I vaguely remembered was her doing a U-turn in the road with me kind of slavering alongside her and kind of half coming round. And somehow she found her way to Bologna airport and we got our flight, but not in a fit state. Not in a fit state at all. That was a miracle that Ren performed that morning.
I mean, to be part of those celebrations and to be part of what was World Superbike history with one of the best finishes ever.
Yeah. Yes.
It's one of the questions I've got. I haven't even picked my pad up yet. I find that when we're older, we're much more able to be in the moment for things.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you're always looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
You speak to some of the younger riders. What was that like? Yeah, but I don't know. As soon as I'd finished, I'm just looking for the next race, next weekend. But as we progress, you tend to just sort of sit back and sort of smell the roses a little bit each weekend and go, do you know what?
Yeah.
This is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And to be able to be in the moment for that, which must have been par for the course, sort of more for that time.
Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen footage of? Would it have been talking about old tracks I'd forgotten about? Hockenheim, 2000, I think. Hockenheim 2000. There were 8 riders in the race for the lead, and they would be fanning out. There would be slipstreaming one, and then fanning out on the way into those Oh man, it was amazing racing, amazing. And 7 of those, as I recall, 7 of those 8 riders were top 8 world championship. It was fantastic. You had Corser and Yanagawa and Edwards and Hager and
Simon Crafar?
No.
Was he not part of that with Yanagawa?
No, he wasn't.
No.
Not at that time. And in fact, the last one of the highlights was Akira actually slipstreamed himself into the lead just at the moment that the Kawasaki let go. Dramatically,
of course.
Exploded,
yes.
And there was smoke everywhere, and the others like dodging through that.
Proper detonation.
Got proper detonation, yeah. And I'm pretty. One of those races that year, it must have been. Was it that one? Finished with Hager getting round the outside of Edwards, so that inside for the last
corner was a right-hander, wasn't it?
It was a typically remarkable, outrageous Hager move that Norrie got round the outside of the Honda, and you couldn't believe he was actually doing it. It was fantastic to watch.
I mean, that was sorry, do carry on, please.
Well, that was just typical of Hager. I think that 2000 season was really screwed up by the FIM. That should have been such a finale, because the FIM interfering with and eventually taking points away from Norrie because they said he'd lost weight over the winter by using this weight loss thing that had some trace of drug in it, and that he knew nothing about. But what they started interfering, and they eventually, you may remember, they banned him for the last race. There was a second Brands Hatch round that year.
Yes,
and that was added on at the end, and they just banned Norrie from riding it. And he should, if they'd left him with his number of points, he would have got into that last round with Edwards. I think 7 points apart, the two of them would have been for that last round.
I'm not sure he ever got over that.
Possibly not. He didn't. He would never give it the impression. Never gave anything away, really. Norrie. He was, but possibly not.
You had the
he was he was a star at that time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I was about to say. You had the joy not only of commentating on some of the greatest characters in World Superbike racing, but then also when the Brits started coming through with JT, with Hodgie, later on with Cal and Jonathan, and we were talking about him earlier on, Tom Sykes. And Eugene, Chaz. If I've missed anybody, I apologise. But I think
Chris Walker
came through as well, didn't he?
A lot of good boys there, yes.
Which made it even better from a British commentary team.
And also quite a substantial mix of nationalities as well. Which was a really nice aspect of it, I think. I think one of the things that I particularly remember, I don't know why it's leapt into my talking about different nationalities, because Spain was never a popular stop for World Supers because people didn't really bother to come and watch it.
No.
And the Spanish press used to give World Superbike quite a hard time. And I'd all know, I only knew, up till then, I only knew Gregorio Lavia as being a very genial, easygoing lad, really. But in the press room in Spain, where would we have been? Valencia? He just laid in. He just suddenly lit up and laid into the Spanish press, who were all assembled there at the time, supposedly for a bit of a kind of launch thing.
Yes.
And he just gave them shit.
Wow.
And that was so unexpected, so unlike this kind of likeable lad that I'd known to that point. Wow, this is a different side to him that I hadn't been aware of. Yeah. But I remember do you remember he he spent the first year that I did World Superbikes in '98. He rode a private Ducati for a lovely chap called Nando De Cecco, a kind of cheery Italian who was a lovely bloke. The Whitham really adored the guy and already knew him, and they had some success. You know, they did quite well, and in fact, well enough for Harold Eckel to decide to sign him for Kawasaki, and I was sort of, we used to go to, Harold had the best beer, the best really lovely, sparkly lager that was on draft in the Kawasaki hospitality that he ran. And so we inevitably ended the day there for a couple of beers. And we were sitting in there when Harold went through. It was quite an outwardly stern went through. With Gregorio behind him. This was before there was any connect. You know, Gregorio was a Ducati privateer at that time, and I just caught Gregorio's eyes, and he just rolled his eyes. He's just thinking, oh, you know, as if he was thinking, oh, what's going on here? And next thing we knew, he'd become a Kawasaki rider.
It's strange, that.
Yeah,
I guess it's part and parcel of what you do in the comms team. And as we said about the journalistic side, you get to find out all sorts of things that you can't let slip on commentary.
Unfortunately, I did. There were times when I wouldn't have said not let slip, but stuff that might have been marginal. And
like what?
Well, what comes into my mind was, something was going on in the paddock on the Saturday night, and Troy Bayliss had banged his head against a kind of arm of an awning and drawn a bit of blood. And I thought there was some cheerful shenanigans going on, and I happened to mention that on air the next morning, and one of the people, the Australian gang, was Peter Goddard,
yes.
lovely, mild-mannered guy, and Peter just arrived furious outside the commentary thing when we came off air, so that we actually mentioned that at all.
Oh,
and he was quite upset by it. Yeah. And I felt bad because he was such a lovely guy. He didn't want to get the wrong side of him for the sake of it. But he seemed to. I mean, I think he forgave me. But at the time, he was fairly riled by it.
It's not in the nature to upset people directly.
No,
same with me.
I'm not a fan of it. I don't want to upset people. No, that's why it was so wonderful the way that I was always a great lover of the guys who behaved well with fans. Like the standout would be Frankie Keeley. I mean, he was just astonishing when he won that last ever race won by a 750 at Donington Park. He was down there in the paddock on the tailgate of the truck, just with this sea of people around him, and he wasn't going to go until everybody had been attended to. You know what I mean? He was fantastic. When you would, even after he'd finished racing, if he came to Monza, there'd be a swarm of people. You knew where he was because there'd be a swarm of people following him around the paddock and beyond. Because at Monza, you could go from the back of the paddock. You were on that infield that you were in the Royal Park of Monza. The whole place was, and you would walk. You would always want to go down underneath the famous banking, that with this huge concrete structure that you would be passing underneath.
Yes. And
then you'd come out the other side and you'd kind of veer off to the right and go across to the Ascari curves. We always wanted to go there to watch some practice. And the grandstands would already be full of enthusiastic Italians, but with a real knowledge of the sport, and they'd know when someone had just set a fastest lap or something like that, and they'd stand and applaud him as he went through. And if there was an accident, they'd be really concerned. And if someone turned out to be all right and got picked up a bit dishevelled, and they'd stand up again and applaud him off. And they were they were completely different from the people down at Rome. When we went to Vallelunga,
okay,
they were quite unpleasant, really. it was they really upset James Totaland when he crashed in Superpole right near the end of his lap. And he said afterwards they were clapping the fact that I'd crashed. They were jeering and clapping the fact that I'd crashed. And I said, no, they weren't. They were just applauding you on being all right. And he said, no, they weren't. They were. And then as the weekend wore on, I realised it was more that way, that they were very much Biaggi people, obviously, because he was racing there, which is why we'd gone there, why the Flamini brothers had taken us there. But yeah, they were a different kind of species altogether down there. Weird. I suppose you were halfway to proper mafiosi down there, perhaps.
The further south you get, the stronger the character.
Yeah,
is probably a better, a reasonable way to put it. One thing that certainly from a World Superbike perspective over the years that I've found as a fan and as a viewer is, and I think this is for motorcycle racing generally, the characters of riders have changed so much. I think from the golden days of your commentary in World Superbike and the characters we said, with your Hagas, your Corsas, your Colin Edwards and people like that, who proper party people who win on a Sunday, party on a Sunday night. Nowadays, it's just not there. The characters.
It seems like it can't be. It's the same in the motocross world. It seems like it can't be, can it? You've not got your Carlas and your Noises from the 1980s anymore. That's long gone.
And I don't think it's not for the better.
Sadly not, no.
We're of an age, we know the way it's...
Ultimate professionalism, I suppose, that's what's required.
But I think characters are what makes sport, generally. Whether it's snooker, football, golf, motorcycle racing, characters are important.
But I think there are characters still in there. I think there are characters still around.
There are some, but they're not as prevalent as they used to be. And it's very sponsor-driven now. It's very wear the right cap and...
Yes. I know. I mentioned how beautiful Killy was with fans and things like that. But equally so, there were some other characters who didn't give a toss, really. I can remember watching Norrie Haga, bless him. He would evade people. I remember a beautiful day in a paddock, sunshine, sparkling, people having lunch in the Yamaha department. And I don't know why I came to watch this happening before me. I think that was Magnicor as well. And Norrie was sat there, and there was a lad with a Norrie Haga cap, a geeky-looking lad. No, I think he might have been German. He had a German geekiness about him. But he was obviously wanting Norrie to sign it. And I think Norrie was aware of this. And what he did was, when he'd finished eating, he hopped into the truck, and it looked like he was going to go out the back way. And this lovely little lad saw this, had been watching his every move, went scurrying round the back. And as soon as he'd done that, Norrie hopped out the front again and hopped onto his scooter and made off. And the lad reappeared round the front of the thing, and it was too late. Norrie had gone. And I just thought, it's funny the way people are. With Max Biaggi could be like that as well. I once saw him come out of his motorhome, and there was this obviously very, very, just a middle-aged woman with a poster she wanted signed and stuff like that, and she'd waited there for ages, and Max just shook his head and rode off. And so, yeah, it's you'd think that people would enjoy fans a bit more, really, and
yes,
and a lot of them do. Most of them do. Most of them are pretty good with them. Just occasionally, I remember Foggy being very rude to a man.
Foggy? No,
a man in Germany who spoke only German and had these photographs of Foggy on the Ducati with him, and Carl was kind of, while he was kind of paying him some desultory attention, he was being quite rude about him talking to us in English, you know.
I can imagine. I can imagine him doing that.
One of the lovely things that did happen, incidentally, was that as the Brits established themselves more and more, they became quite engagingly popular abroad. So I remember Tom Sykes coming out of the back of his garage at Monza and being immediately submerged in a lot of fans who'd been waiting out the back there for him in his top Kawasaki days. And that was good to see. It was good to see the Brits being paid a bit of attention. You know, that was lovely to see.
Because it was an Italian series, wasn't it, before Dorna took over, and it was very much a European series before we kind of invaded a little bit with Foggy and JT, Hodgie and the rest of them. But when that influx of 4 or 5 came in the late 2000s, that really did kind of put A, British Superbikes on the map, and B, British riders. And then it's kind of gone to a point now where it's incredibly difficult. We won't see the likes of that again, where sort of 3 or 4 riders in a season go to Worlds.
Yes, that was. It's one of the things that puzzles me, and I don't quite get how it happens. It's really terrible in motocross, by the way. There's scarcely any British presence at all. You've got to have a lot of money to get a foothold in there. But the kids who've done well in the British paddock, you see, if people do quite well, even like your mate Jordan, your former lad Jordan Weaving, I always think that things will go on, that progress will be made, and I'm never prepared for people to just, in some cases, just turn their back on the sport when things don't eventually come their way, understandably.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, when you get someone like, you get people like Spud Nesbitt and Rory Skinner, who look absolutely sensational little riders, and then they go off onto the world stage and it doesn't happen. And I'm puzzled as to how it hasn't happened, and they've ended up back in the British paddock, albeit successfully.
Absolutely.
But I just think that must be really leading to somewhere when they disappear abroad, and it doesn't. And Brad Ray is another example. I thought Brad was just a brilliant talent who would really go places. And I'm not even that up on what he's doing at the moment, on how things are going with him and Taron in World Supers, but it doesn't look like they're going great. And I'm puzzled as to how that is.
It's very different from Brad's point of view. I think it's incredibly difficult because the sort of third tier kit and Yamaha at the moment aren't in the best place with
the top kit.
With the top kit,
yes.
So the third tier kit is going to be hard work.
Yeah.
I think I spoke to him at World Superbikes last year, and he admitted he's struggling with the electronics.
Yeah.
The switch from Motec to Magnetti Morelli has been huge.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a language barrier within the team as well. And he'd only signed up for the European rounds last season, hadn't he?
Yes.
And there was only one flyaway this year anyway.
Yeah.
Phillip Island. The rest of it is Europe, isn't it? And I think it's just been a much, much bigger, much harder transition than I think A, he realised, and B, maybe what it was painted out to be.
Yes.
Beforehand, with Shaky Byrne as his manager.
Yes.
To make that move. Personally, I would be really surprised if he had another year next year. I kind of have a feeling he may end up back here next year. Okay. Taron, I think, is in a different position because I think he's ingratiated, if that's the right word, himself to HRC.
Yeah.
Head down, work away, do what you have to do. He got the Suzuka ride, didn't he, last year?
Yeah.
And did incredibly well.
Very well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's, from a Honda point of view, there may be a bit more of a path for Taz. But I think also it's really difficult for the lads to move on from BSB now with how different the regulations are electronically.
Yes.
It's such a massive change.
Yeah.
The World Superbike, if I remember rightly, and I'm sure there's friends of mine who'll pick me up on this if I'm wrong, because they gleefully do that. The World Superbike electronics are more open than MotoGP.
Yeah.
So there is a much wider range of what they can do at World Superbikes because MotoGP is capped.
Yeah.
The bikes are obviously a different level and a different world completely,
Yes.
but from an electronics point of view. So you're going from fairly straightforward electronics in BSB to this whole new world of GPS corner by corner.
Yeah.
And if you've not been brought up on that, or everybody needs two seasons at everything, I think, if you're moving up.
Yeah.
2 seasons minimum.
But when I had the pleasure of doing the Italian CIV stuff for quite a few seasons with Motors TV, bless them, who were a lovely outfit to work, just from a studio in Buckingham. But that was from like 2011, which was the centenary. The championship had started in 1911.
Incredible.
And at one stage, a third of the Grand Prix Moto 3 boys were lads I'd commentated on in Moto 3 and CIV Moto 3 and their new class pre-Moto 3, even younger. and they and I thought, God, look, we had him. There was a great stack of them, some of whom like Morbidelli and Gianantonio
and Zecchi.
You know, I used to pronounce his name so clumsily. I used to say Di Antonio, and then I heard someone say Gian Antonio, and I thought, oh, that's the way.
Yeah, there's an extra N in
there. That's a lovely way. Yeah, Gian Antonio. Yeah, fair enough. But there are kids who have made the push right through. But at one stage in Moto 3, they were. But there still are. A lot of them still are around there. And kids like Stefano Nepper and lads like that. There's a lot of lads who came through the Italian CIV route, and it's obviously worked well.
It has for both Italy and Spain.
Yeah. For
CEV and CIV, that's been the proving ground.
And CEV, you kind of always knew that, but the CIV came as quite a surprise to me, really, that it moved so many people through.
Well, they're getting to grips with it slowly but surely, aren't they? The Valentino effect has helped.
Yes,
and you know you've got to push the kids through somehow, and I think that's how we struggle a little bit here because we're still production biased.
Yes, very very much. Yeah.
But that's just how British racing is.
Yeah, which people really enjoy being
absolutely
being like that. And there are other lads who I love. You mentioned I love the World Endurance stuff. I really like. I'm hoping to be back on the Boulder later this year, and it's really great working with a team again. I do the motocross completely on my own. And
really?
It's lovely being in amongst just a full team of people on site. You can't beat that.
Terry Reimer. There's two tall.
No.
Does it? Has he not done it?
Because the pay system became so appalling that I just refused to have anything to do with it.
So who's the team now? Not much.
Well, it clashed last time. It's a complete mismatch. It's whoever they can get hold of. We had T-Mac. Taylor Mackenzie was out at Spa, and Tom Gaymore is the kind of guy who knits it all together, really.
Yes.
But he's basically a car man. So it's just who they can get hold of. We struggle really with that because some of them have got involved again with the actual racing side.
Yes.
Obviously, Gino did,
of course,
in the long term, and so it's just really who we can get in there. Tommy did a good stint with it. I did a 24-hour race with Tommy a couple of seasons ago, and he was great. Yes, he was back in again. In fact, he went work with Ben Rumbold. We had two Southwesterners in together, and that's right. Whereas me and Joe Ackroyd were seen as a couple of Northerners who slotted in together.
Ackroyd's very good on the bike, and Tommy was very good as well.
And also Tom told me best of all, because I didn't get the pleasure of working in the booth with him. He was with Tom. Was Chrissy Rouse. Chrissy Rouse did so much.
Yes, he did as well.
He was brilliant.
He could turn his hand to anything.
Absolutely anything at all,
and be successful at it.
Yeah,
I think World Endurance is having a.
Well, what I was thinking of was, there's some lovely, great people in there. People that I've commentated on in European Superstock 600. Remember that lovely series that was wiped out?
Stonemaker, Dan Linfoot.
Lads like Christian Giammarino and Kevin Callier was a Moto 3 CIV champion who didn't get to make it on the bigger bikes. in the mainstream, but because he did do some super stock foul stuff in Europe. But he steered his way into there. In fact, they won that last race, didn't they? On an Aprilia.
Yes, they did.
Yes, on the Nuovo M2 Aprilia thing that used to be constantly in CIV Superbikes.
And how the teams have grown.
Yeah.
And watching Dan Linfoot head back after the debacle that was the end of last year.
Yeah, Dan's produced some great rides in. Oh, did he?
They won They might have won the Superstock. Or they certainly did at Le Mans, didn't they?
Well, he had a fantastic ride last year. Was that at Suzuka? I thought it was.
Suzuka. He did well at. No,
he had a brilliant.
No, sorry, he did, because that was the middle of the season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We spoke to him. I think just after that, it might have been Brands Hatch. Is either pre or post?
Is Dan still out there? Is he still out there doing stuff?
At World Endurance, yeah.
He is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure he won the Superstock race at Le Mans.
Well,
and was well up there at Spa as well. That's his thing this year. He's taken the Optimum bike sponsorship. He's with, I'm sure it's the Suzuki, the CERT team. I'm sure it's Suzuki, the Superstock arm of that.
Yes.
And he's loving life. Good. Westy, I think, is still knocking about out there.
Yeah, he is.
Joe Ackroyd's doing a bit, and you get the Kawasaki lot with Craig and Chris Walker, and there's always plenty digging in. So I think it just feels that that's an option now for British ride, which it kind of dropped off the radar a little bit, didn't it? It's always gone on, but it was always a little bit more European.
Yes.
But now that sort of the Brits are catching on and going, I want a piece of that.
I can't do Suzuka. I think it's the same weekend as this World Vets Motocross is on at Farley Castle. Yeah, I think that any guys who want to stick around long enough. Do you know, one of the things that really surprised me? I mean, we knew enough about people who definitely aged, had taken years off. Chris Walker, bless him, was always famous for having knocked a few years off his age. But I was really surprised, for example, at JR, John Reynolds, and at Shaky, both of them admitting to me that they'd knocked a couple of years off, so I never knew their right ages. Because I always used to like to know the right ages, and I never ever threw stuff away.
No.
So I had a series of teams that Steve Plater had ridden for.
Yes.
Including was it Wilbur's suspension, the German run?
Wow.
The German run World Supersport team that he was with.
Good grief. That was brief.
Yeah.
Incredible.
He was in World Supersport briefly. Yeah. And his age moved backwards all the time. So his date of birth had kind of seemed to have gone from something like 68 to 70 to 72, and it only came to light when he'd already retired, but he turned 40, and a big deal was made in the BSB paddock of him turning 40. And I thought, I've got that 1968 date on a sheet of paper somewhere.
I've always seen it as 72.
The mist of time. No.
So he is 68. That's incredible.
Now I might have got the dates I might have got the year slightly wrong there. So you need to check it out.
But I think a lot of riders are 32 for about 4 years, because that seems an age where you can just about get away with it.
I can remember Josh Brooks, bless him, saying to me, Jack, just go easy on the age, will you? I was mentioning it a bit too often.
But Josh is still doing a great job, finishing second in the senior. And I think he is. Is he 41?
He'll be something like that.
He definitely starts with a 4, bless him.
Yeah.
But he's still out there.
And Christian will be moving that way, because he didn't move into road racing from a very successful supermoto career for a long time. So I knew him as an 18-year-old supermoto star who'd just done his A-levels, and it was a long time ago.
I think he's in his 3rd year of being 34 now. A great fella. So much time for Christian. Yeah. It's the good thing about doing this. He's getting to know the people behind the visor, behind the microphone, and just and enjoying the characters. Because as we said, there aren't too many characters on the TV where you take them away from the racetrack, you sit down with them.
One of the things I love is people's career paths.
Yes.
And how much they cross and interweave. And Christian was one who, you know, a career that took him where it took him. Things. You remember that season when Bimota were in World Supers, but not amalgamated, so they weren't even given points.
No, couldn't get the points.
And Christian was getting some terrific results during that year, but the points never showed up.
No.
They never showed up on the...
And didn't lead him anywhere either in World Superbikes. He should have had another season and made a career of that.
That could have really worked out, couldn't it? But you never know who... And the fact that... I remember a wonderful World Superbike race at Donington Park that, oh my goodness me, the lovely Czech guy led for a long time on that yellow Ducati, the Effenbach beer back Ducati.
There are at least Jakob Smerts. There's at least 1,000 people shouting at their TV or at their car stereo. Jakob Smerts.
But there's Kuba. There's Kuba. Almost winning that race, and he got nabbed by Melandri late on. And then when they were talking to camera afterwards, and the first thing Marco said was how well Kuba had ridden, and he seemed, and he was obviously very familiar with him. Do you know what I mean? And then I checked back and realised that they'd both ridden 250 Grand Prix together. You know, the Kuba was like the top 6 man in 250 GPs, and when Melandri was winning, so obviously they knew one another because these paths they lead in these fascinating ways and cross over now and then. You know,
they do, and you find that with the older riders. You say, "Oh, I was teammates with so and so, and I raced against him."
They can really surprise you.
Yeah.
Oh, where you were?
There was McGuinness was in a 250 race. At MotoGP in 250 GPs, and he might have been the one that Ralph Waldman was in. But there are certain, when you look further down, when you see your Simon Buckmasters and your James Haydens and people like that.
In fact, those 250 GPs at around that time, I've still got because I never took anything. I've still got got 250 GP results sheets that I looked up and printed off, and you know, with people like. Sylvain Gintoli in there and Chaz Davies and all in there kind of point scoring stuff, and you think, wow, it's amazing how all these people are around and the careers that they've gone through.
The one that tickled me was Luke Mossey when he became teammates with Hector Barbara.
Yes.
When he did the wildcard at Donington, and they actually raced against each other in 250 GPs and then became teammates in 2020 at OMG Racing.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's the beauty of it all. I was with Jamie Robinson a couple of weeks ago, and now there's a career that you kind of think, how, what, and how things change. And he was showing pictures. There was him, there was Simo, there was Hodgie, and he said, well, there's James Hayden. He was my teammate at one point, and then it's a really small industry that we find ourselves in.
Yes,
everybody, you are only 2 steps removed from pretty much everybody.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Even Valentino, you know somebody who knows Valentino.
Yeah.
So it's from the very top to podcasters at the very bottom.
Valentino even knew me. That's what really. He came up to the top of that grandstand at Monza, and he was there. Presumably, he was doing a bit of work for Italian Telly at that time, but he was there. There was an Italian guy who won the European Superstock FOW Championship, who was a mate of his, and he'd come and he was there to watch him. And he appeared also at Misano to check out how he was doing. And I remember just being a bit thrown at him just appearing and just attempting to introduce myself. And he just said, I know. That's really right, okay. Perhaps he just said that to everybody, more likely.
No, I find that he knows an awful lot about what goes on in motorcycle racing. We sat down with Tim and Tom Neve
Yeah.
back at the end of January. They'd just come back from his ranch with John McGuinness.
Yeah.
They did the 100-kilometer weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
And they played the voice note that Valentino had sent to John.
Yeah.
And Valentino was like, "Ciao, John. You want to bring a Tim and a Tom and an Eve? I know these guys. They're British Superbike. I know these guys." And Tim and Tom were just like, that Valentino knows who they are.
Yeah.
And it is. Were there ever points that you kind of got starstruck, or were you kind of too professional in the moment for that?
No, I used to get starstruck. I've always got starstruck.
She's a great answer, you know. I love that.
And I never really got to speak to Max Biaggi because I was a bit too. It's Max Biaggi, you know, and he never seemed a very. He didn't seem like the sort of bloke that would particularly accommodate. I really pushed the boat out with Carlos Checa when he was about to become World Superbike champion, because I knew I always want to have plenty of stuff to go on when I know that I'm going to be on air after the event has taken place, and all the rundown to it. The brands after British Superbike champions have been crowned and stuff like that. So I made a big effort to go and get into Carlos's motorhome and get some information from him. And I can remember his impatience when I got off to a really bad start by asking him where he was born. And he took my paper and wrote down this long name of the village that he'd been. And things got a lot better after that, thankfully. But I did make me feel a complete tool at the time. And another thing is how you've got to kind of choose your times, haven't you? I tried to do that with Josh is great. Josh Brooks is great. He'll really enjoy talking about stuff and give you the full hit. And before that 2011 finale with Tommy Hill and Hopper, Tommy was all right doing that, but John wasn't. I didn't get to speak to him until quite near and kind of almost the morning of the race to actually try and get a bit more info on him, background stuff on him, and bless him, he started talking about some stuff, which was very nice of him, and then suddenly said, "No, I can't do this anymore," and he walked off, and I think that was understandable, because he was on the brink of the championship decider. It wasn't the right time to go and speak to him. I don't think you've got to choose your times.
Very much,
really,
very
much. John was always very approachable guy, very. Because it's interesting, that thing of being starstruck, isn't it? But
we're fans of the sport, you know.
I was always a bit slightly that way with Bayliss, but actually he was a really approachable, lovely bloke, And there are some where you look back and you think, I wish I'd, just delved in a bit more, really.
I think some of that comes with experience, doesn't it? That you can kind of temper it a little bit.
Yeah.
But there are certain people who you just can't make that step with.
Yes.
I find it with Leon Haslam.
Oh, really?
Leon hasn't. I've known him for years.
Well, he
has a little bit of an aura about him.
I had the Whitham inroad to that family,
of course,
because he was very close to them.
Yes.
So, even though I never felt, with Ron, it was Ron who used to, and a lovely bloke, but I just used to be a little bit in awe of, because
Ron is fan. We had the joy of sitting down with Ron a couple of weeks ago at the farm.
Oh, yes.
And we've done a couple of hours with him. I think by the time our chat goes out, Ron would have been either last week or the week before in the world of the off-track time machine and how we manage the shows. And I sat down and I said to Leon before we started rolling, I was like, "Why on earth am I nervous sat next to you?" He said, because I'm cross all the time. so there might be an element of that. But is that like Rob Mack, Josh Brooks makes me nervous. So, I'm only human.
Josh, I was we always had motocross as a common.
That's what I was going to say. You had that's his biggest passion, isn't it?
To enjoy that.
And the knowledge that you have and that he has.
You know, it was these guys all signed this book for me that my when I finished British Superbikes, they gave me my team, who, you know, like our team from Eurosport, the main men, like the main men and women, like Tim, the producer, and Tim, the director, rather, and Ren and Shaky, Neil Mack, James Whitham. We had a really lovely evening eating near Alton Park.
Yes.
And they presented me with this book that people had signed. It was absolutely amazing what they'd written in there. It just absolutely floored me. I didn't realise that being a simple commentator, you played such a part in their life and their career. I really had never, ever occurred to me. Never, ever occurred to me until I read some of those messages, and I thought, wow, that's really something. That's really something. And I kind of wished I'd been aware of that sooner, because I wasn't at all.
It's a difficult role being commentator, isn't it? Because for me, it's one of the most divisive roles on social media, because you can't please everybody.
No,
in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely not. No.
And neither should you in terms of a commentary role. And I think for you to have that and understand, and as I said before we came on air, we put it out on the socials yesterday that we were coming down to see you, and the response was magnificent. You are still incredibly well respected and incredibly missed for your commentary point of view.
Right.
I'll leave that with you for a second.
I just have to take your word for that.
I'll show you the messages before I leave. I'll show you before I leave. It's absolutely true. I think there was an overlap, wasn't there, with Worlds and BSB for a bit. You were working almost every weekend.
Yeah, from 2007. Yeah, 07 to doing both of them to 2016. And with 1 year off, which was 2014, because I got a phone call from Simon Reed at the end of, when I was at the dirt bike show, end of 2013, saying, we decided to drop you from World Superbikes. And that came as a real blow. How do you remember? I was just outside the loo at Staudley, where the dirt bike show used to take place. And I was just completely flabbergasted. In fact, our wonderful 3-time world motocross champion, Dave Thorpe, who I saw and had a quick word with as I was leaving that evening, it was a Sunday evening. Bless him, he rang me the next morning, first thing on the Monday morning, and said, "Jack, are you all right? You were in a terrible state when I left you yesterday evening." And I thought that was very kind of him, because I didn't realise I was that visibly shaken. But anyway, they put me onto Speedway for a while, and that didn't work out too well. I heard that the Speedway fraternity weren't too impressed with me being put on. And partly it was because we had awful meetings to do. We had to do these midweek Swedish League Speedway meetings, and there was just barren periods of nothing happening on the lead into it. It was just awful. And I'd done my utmost to get properly set up for it, but apparently they saw me as a road racing commentator.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't belong on. And I wouldn't say, but in years gone by, I really enjoyed the Speedway, because Eurosport used to run a 1 hour highlight package of the previous weekend's Speedway Grand Prix, and they were real fun to do. They were lovely, and I met some of those guys, and was delighted to be doing that. They took me off. They put me back onto. So I missed Sylvain Guintoli's championship year, which was a real regret. But then I went back onto World Superbike for another couple of years, the start of the Jonathan Ray era.
Yes. I mean, this is why I think people hold you in such regard alongside Whit, because from a British perspective, we were all watching British Superbikes and World Superbikes.
Yeah.
Because MotoGP was there was a bit of it on Eurosport. It was behind a paywall, or it was on Sky, or wherever it was,
Yes.
or
Yes.
highlights on ITV.
Yeah.
Whereas BSB and Worlds have been accessible for as long as I can remember.
Yes, that's true.
Since back to 94 for Foggy's days, whatever. It's all that time.
Yeah.
And for the British fans to follow you through each weekend, you've talked them through thousands of races.
Yeah.
And it becomes it becomes a staple part, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it was the same with Keith and Julian, and Toby and Julian, yourself and Whit. That double act takes years to develop. But the important thing was you had some great opportunities at it, with some great racing, commentating on British riders doing great things.
Yes.
So you were our outlet into the world of BSB and World Superbikes.
Having said that, I don't like bias. I don't like there are certain sports that get commentated on that the bias is or the bias to Brits.
Oh, well, no, without doubt.
You know what I mean? I never wanted that. I love the international flavour of everything.
But it was you were our outlet to them. Not that you were biased towards them, far from it. But you were our outlet into what Jonathan was doing, what Tom was doing, what Cal was doing, and Nord, alongside Biaggi, Melandri, Leon as well when he was there. And it wasn't from that point of view, but that was our outlet to what the boys were doing. Yeah. Without
against these other top geeks.
Exactly.
Foreigners.
But to balance the two, to then the British Superbike Championship was reaching a peak in 2011 with Hopper and Hill, one of the most intense finales that's been documented many times, and on with Chrissy and Dom as well. So I don't feel to go through that because the boys covered it so well with you. So with respect to them, but from a BSB perspective as a whole, you then made that your own once the world side had ceased. Yeah. And that became sort of the shaky years, and with Alex Lowe's in 13, but then beyond that, it was mainly the shaky years, but then coming in with Josh Brooks and Scott Reddin. Yeah. Some incredible seasons of British Superbike action.
Really fine racing, really fantastic racing, and just a lovely catalogue of rides. You know, one of the biggest problems is you want to see everybody win. There's so many lovely blokes involved. You think, and they're not going to quite win it, but they deserve to, or he deserves to, or he deserves to, and you're just like you'd like to see all of them doing really well.
No, it's right. It happens. It happens here.
Like Glenn and Tommy. Blow me neck.
Incredible.
One of them had to be a winner, and one of them wasn't going to be a winner. And that was terrible.
And short of doing it on count back for race wins, half a point is as close as you can make it.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you still enjoy following the BSB and Worlds and everything? Are you still keeping track on what's going on?
I follow BSB. I keep my eye on BSB, and just to see how the results are going. There's some fascinating results from
Knockhill. Yeah.
4th place for Storm Stacey. When Storm appeared, bless him, appeared at the Hawkston Park International Motocross at the beginning of February.
Okay.
And so too did Ryan Vickers.
Yeah, he's a motocross boy anyway, isn't he? Big time.
And Fraser Rogers, who's another motocross boy. And another motocross boy, Alistair Seeley.
Yes.
Who couldn't get a ride for the Northwest 200 when he's had 29 wins there, which had staggered me. But anyway, they all came up to the comms tower. It was great. But Storm, who'd been the first one to come up there on his own, he joined in the commentary with me. He just sort of naturally kind of took on that mantle for a while. It was really funny, really funny.
He's not shy, that boy.
He's not a shy boy. No.
He's not a shy boy in any way, shape or form. I spoke to him last night on something completely to do away with racing, and he's like, "Dave, I need your advice. Tell me what you need, mate. Tell me what you need." So with the focusing on BSB mainly, what are your best memories sort of beyond 2011?
Beyond 20. God, do you know what? that question is a bit like pick out your best 3 races of the year or something like that. It's just one enormous blur. Even at the end of a weekend, I'd usually be on a kind of 4-hour drive home, and it'd be, and it would all meld into one. Really, it was just, yeah. It was amazing. It was amazing how often I mean, there are fragments of highlights of things that jump out of you, like Peter Hickman and Shaky coming out of Woodcote, and Shaky getting a huge power slide on as Hickey took the win, and wow, that was fairly epic. And also when you had the joy of being able to go where you wanted, really. Just, wander.
Yeah.
And I remember, and it seems an unlikely sport, really, but on the inside of the track, because we had our, for a few years at Brands Hatch, in British Superbikes, all the race trucks, race direction and stuff were in that infield in between Halewood Hill and the drop down to Graham Hill Bend. They were there. They were there in that odd spot before they more sensibly got moved outside the track and way back opposite towards the Thistle.
MSV, aren't they now?
Yeah,
yeah.
And I went across to the inside of the drop down from Druids, and so I'm very close too. You're very close. It was where there was a lovely bloke whose career was Davide Giuliano, whose career virtually finished down there, didn't it? He was a lovely bloke who had, pretty much stopped by the age of 29. And I think it was largely because he was on Philip Neal's team and he had a colossal get off down there, didn't he? That
he hit the fence.
He scared the living daylights out.
Never saw him again after that.
No, not really. Not anywhere.
Not anywhere. No, that was enough to.
But Shaky coming down there. My goodness me, I just didn't realise that those guys, they're either absolutely full on it or they're full off it. And he was coming down that hill. Heaven knows what speed he was attaining just from Druids down. But the rate, they always used to say of John Surtees that he was the fastest man off the brakes and onto the throttle. And Shaky off the throttle onto the brakes at that point. Blow me, to get into Graham Hill Bend, to scrub the speed to get into Graham Hill Bend. That was just awesome to watch. It was absolutely incredible. Other people looked good, but Shaky looked just... It was something that really sticks with you, seeing that amount of effort. And you, of course, lap after lap, they're doing stuff like this.
I find that from his MotoGP background in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I remember... I was at Barcelona in 2016 and I was sat chatting to Mark Woodish, to Brains. And he was explaining, because I've never ridden, I've never raced. I don't, if we coast into a corner.
It's amazing what you can find out about.
Absolutely. And that really helps understand the sport. And he was saying, as soon as you shut off, the smaller gap between rolling the throttle and getting on the brake and vice versa, release the brake and onto the throttle, the shorter the gap on the telemetry, the faster you're going to go.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
But we're used to going into corners and, roll off, coasting.
Yeah.
But you're not. You're either on the brakes or the throttle.
Yeah, I know.
There is no middle ground.
Which is what must make racing so hard.
That's what makes it so intense.
It's so intense.
You're either going quickly or you're stopping. There's no middle ground to it.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing is fascinating. So when you do that level of racing, as Shaky did at Grand Prix level, to come back to race production motorcycle, all of a sudden it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
And he was an incredibly classy rider.
Clever ringer of a neck.
Yes, but also intelligent as well.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's something that I've always banged the drum for, that everybody can ride. Every one of those guys out there and girls can ride a motorcycle.
Yeah. That
last 1%, that's what makes the difference of your racecraft, your understanding of the sport. And for want of a better, this makes me sound like I'm being derogatory, and I'm not, but racing intelligence. Not everybody's got it.
No.
but they can all race. And also luck and the planets aligning, I think, are important as well. There's an awful lot of luck involved.
There is a huge amount of luck involved.
And being in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
In a lot of ways. So last season for BS, go for it.
For some reason, you've just reminded me of...
This is the idea.
Bruno. and
this is what we do.
And thinking... I'd like to get out. This track's great. I'd like to see more of it. And Peter Goddard, who we mentioned earlier, when I said to Peter, I'd really like to get more of a look at this track, and he said, "Oh, there's that. Look, that tarmac lane runs all the way around the track on the inside." Really? Yeah, he said, get a paddock scooter and you can just go all the way around the track there. Oh, right. So he said, here, have this. And what I particularly remember was it was Andrew Pitt, when Andrew Pitt had won a race on the Yamaha, the red Yamaha.
Yes.
And Signor Conti, that is Whitham's lovely friend who used to kind of own that team anyway. And I was going around inside this long right-hander, and there was... And just remember, Andrew Pitt just around downhill around the outside of me. It was almost like I was on the track with him. It was a great feeling.
The privilege of having media passes is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get to places that you never expect to go.
And that evening, was it that? No, it was the evening after did he win? Where did he win? Did he win at Mazar? Oh, damn, I can't remember. But Andrew was such a shrewd lad, and he you often find that out when you have people in as co-commentators, which we had quite often. And you'd be surprised at the people who really stand out doing stuff like that, like Aaron Slight and Andrew. Well, Andrew Pitt was, well, of course, I must have been in Italy. He was on an Italian chat show on a Sunday evening.
Okay,
that year.
Excellent.
And, speaking and understanding and being part of it in Italian. And that really impressed me.
That is an impressive for a race, because racers are so solely focused on racing.
Yeah.
And they invariably, over the last 20, 25 years, a lot of them have missed a lot of school.
Well, having said that, I mean, the one time that I flew in what they called the flying wardrobe, which was from Groningen back to Schiphol in Amsterdam after a early Monday morning after World Supers, and that must have been 1998. I reckon that was my first year, because that was the only time they afforded us that privilege, that luxury. And there was only 15 of us on board, and then your luggage was dropped in the back behind you here. It was a remarkable little outfit. And two of the people on the plane were Gregorio Lavia and the big Slovenian lad who raced World Endurance as well.
Skopek?
I've forgotten his name. But do you know, those two lads were, I sat beside them in the back of that plane. They were talking. Remember, one was Slovenian and one was Spanish. They were conversing in Italian, and then both conversing with me in English. And I was thinking, I'm the bloody hapless Englishman here, and I don't know any of these languages at all. And these guys are just fluent. They're just able to use this stuff every day. Like it's
one of my biggest regrets of being young is not learning another language.
Yeah.
Whether it be Spanish, Italian, whatever. I wish I'd made the effort when I was younger.
I got taught French by a Scottish woman, and that never worked too well at school. That was Miss McGregor.
Oh, that's that. No, French with a Scottish accent is probably not going to work too well. Let's have a look through. Most of the questions I had written down, I've kind of covered away quite happily. How are we doing for time for Ludo?
I don't know where we are. I have no idea what the time is.
3:00.
Oh, we're doing well. I expected it to be later than that. You're all right. I mean, if you want, for the sake of the viewing public, to finish now,
no, not at all. No, we've plenty of time, as long as we don't encroach on Ludo's time.
Well, there's my tennis coaching as well.
Tennis coaching at 6:00. We've done well before then, Jack. I remember you said about that. That's the important one, with the grandkids and your own tennis. What's the best advice you'd give a new commentator coming in?
Oh, Lord. God. I think a former motocross racer called Russ Jarman, who lives down west of London, works as a kind of school, a very posh school maintenance man and general handyman and stuff like that. He's a really lovely bloke. Jack, how are you? He's a really, really lovely fella. And he described to me as when I was doing motocross for Eurosport, and I saw Russ, and he said, his dad was known as Dirt Man. He had a lovely, lovely dad. And Russ said it was, here, I was watching the motocross and the motocross Grand Prix the other day, and it was just like having my mate Jack sat on the sofa next to me. And I thought, yeah, what a lovely way of putting it. Yeah, sitting on the sofa next to the person you're talking to is probably, as we are now, is probably the answer. And remember that and do bear in mind that you'll never not be nervous just before you go on air. That doesn't happen. If you're hosting a live event or commentating live or going live on air, there'll always be. It's just until the moment that you hear your own voice, whether it be in a stadium, and that voice is now yours, whether you like it or not. So there's no going back. It started, and it's the same with a broadcast. Once that countdown has happened, and you have to utter those first words, then you're in it, and there's nothing you can do to go back. So you have to go forward. However well or not so well those first few words have gone.
When you make a mistake in commentary, because it happens, and it happens every week across the world to every commentator, do you become more adept at dealing with it when it happens? Because it does happen, because such is the nature of commentary. Sometimes there's a lot going on and you may forget something.
You just have to
roll through it.
Step over it and roll through it. And, it's not so-and-so, it's so-and-so. Well, bugger me, I got that wrong, didn't I? But strange enough, I never swore on air, which I find remarkable. But I remember in a very long time ago, in 1983, there was a grandstand trophy race, were kind of one-off at the Fox and Hounds at Newbury.
Okay.
In the days when motocross used to appear on mainline telly. And then Murray Walker did it, and he asked me to help him out in the rickety kind of wooden commentary tower. And I remember us being up there, and I was helping him out with advice and pointing stuff out, and he was in charge of the mic, because I remember how much it frightened me when the red light went on, and suddenly he turned from being a perfectly normal bloke into someone shouting his head off. It gave me quite a shock. And but at the end of that first race that we did, he'd made a mistake, and I tried to correct him, and not on air, just and at the end of that race, when he took the cans off and returned to being a normal bloke again, he said, one thing you need to remember, we never tried to correct a mistake. Don't try and correct a mistake. Just go on. And I thought, right, okay, that makes sense then.
So with the commentary when you started and over the years, did you listen to other commentators as well and take a little bit from Murray and take from others, or did you develop it yourself?
I didn't. No, it didn't really. Didn't occur to me to, because it was thrown at me so last minute. It was thrown at me by Hewan and Rider Rabbit, for goodness sake, as my wonderful little daughter used to call him, being a very round, hairy man.
He still is.
Yeah, he calls me Burnicle person in retaliation. But they were first working, doing some stuff with Eurosport, and then had a chance to go for 6 weeks to Sky to do some stuff with them, and that's when they asked me to just step in. God knows why. Presumably because they thought, oh well, he won't last long doing this with you. And hence my first trip across to the West Bank in Paris, and suddenly finding myself in a booth over there. So so there wasn't any reason, there wasn't any chance to prepare anything. It was just in at the deep end.
Off you go.
Yeah.
I think as you look back over the years of commentary, certainly over the last 25, 30 years, the names have been pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Across across MotoGP. Nick Harris in MotoGP. With Steve Day coming in at MotoGP. Steve did Worlds. Now he's doing BSB. Yourself doing World Superbike, BSB. Keith and Julian and Greg Haynes as lead commentators. That's about it.
Yeah.
Throw Toby in there with Jules as well.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe eight people, I think, in total.
Well, it's quite a small industry, isn't it? There's not a lot of room for manoeuvre in that, really. I mean, I've except for managing to keep something going in world endurance, there's no road racing there for me to get my teeth into.
And we'll throw Greg Haynes in there as well. You must remember Greg.
You mentioned it.
Did I? I couldn't remember if I had or not. Thank you. As one of my good friends, I had a sudden panic that I hadn't mentioned it.
No, you did.
Thank you. But yeah, it is.
And one of the absolute highlights of my life, which is probably, I don't know whether it'll be of any interest to your viewers, but the day that George Best died in London, that Friday night and Saturday night, I was doing the Odyssey Arena in Belfast. We had a supercross in Belfast in the Dockland, the Harland Wolff place.
Yeah.
So we had like a packed house of 6,000, and halfway through the evening, the promoter Matt Bates said to me, "Yeah, people are coming up to me about George Best all the time. We're going to have to do something here. We're going to have to do something before the main event." And I'm so damn old that I actually saw George Best play football because I was at Manchester Art College, and so we used to occasionally go to Old Trafford, and so that was right at the tail end of the Best, Charlton, Crerand kind of ilk, and so I said, right, okay, well, he said, we need to do a minute's silence, but you're going to have to lead it we'll do it from the top of the tabletop jump over the finish line in the middle of the arena. And Jesus. So, and again, that was what I was saying about any kind of nerves before you start. But once it's your voice. And I just set off, not really knowing where I was going with it. And the best thing I could have done, I didn't realize at the time, was I didn't mention him by name. I just mentioned the last match of the season had been a Wednesday evening thing where they'd beaten West Bromwich Albion 7-1, and Best had scored a couple of goals. And I kind of took the story in from that kind of angle. And when I mentioned the name George Best for the first time, the whole place exploded. It just, honestly, it was an extraordinary response, a deafening response. And then, and after that, once I came to my senses and it slightly calmed down a bit, and I said a bit more and then asked for a minute's silence. And I hadn't got a what. I was like I am now. And Matt was down there at the foot of the tabletop, and so he had a watch, and so he was going to set it off. So I started it, and yet absolute silence for that minute until Matt gave me the nod that was the minute up. And I was getting a bit croaky. I was getting quite emotional by that time. And I just said, thank you. And the place just erupted again.
Wow.
That was just an astonishing thing to happen. And we did it again the next night. But I knew what to expect the next night. It was that first night when it was completely unexpected. You don't realize that what what heroes people are to to George Best in Belfast was an absolute kind of council estate hero.
No question.
Astonishing. But I didn't realise until that moment that he wasn't just a kind of a drunken chap who'd lived a life.
An incredible life as well.
Yeah.
Who do you admire from other sports?
Oh, blimey.
It's a curveball.
Sorry?
A curved ball for you.
That is a curveball for me.
Just while we're talking about George Best and football, I'll give you time to think. Just while we're talking about George Best and football, we're all in.
Oh, Novak Djokovic, very, very much. I'm the president of the Novak Djokovic fan club because the people at the Thorndale Tennis Club don't hold him in high esteem at all.
Oh, really?
Nor does my lovely tennis playing friend in North Yorkshire, Keith Hodgson. And but to me, I think the guys, I think tennis players generally are such good speakers after the event when they're just, they've come off a 3.5 hour match and they're expected to talk sense in a language that's not their first language, and they do it so well. I think I've always probably been more the same in a sense. Foreign people seem to speak English, but Frankie Killy speaks a wonderful line in English. There are foreign people, I think, speak our language better than we do. And I think that's particularly the case with footballers. I think English-speaking footballers, 99% of them don't talk very well at all. But foreign footballers playing in England do talk rather well. They interview much better than the native English do.
When you listen to Thierry Henry, and people like that, and he understands the English humour as well, which is important, which is unusual for a Frenchman.
It is.
But he spent so long at Arsenal with Winterburn and Tony Adams and the rest of them.
But they get. And it's not just the old guys as well. It's the younger element are also pretty brilliant at just coming up with the right lingo. And I just I really quite admire that.
A hit pop then. I have some random questions that we often ask our first time guests. So we have some little random questions. Thank you, Jack. This has been absolutely fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of this so far. We could talk about the career side of things for hours and hours, but at some point I'd like to do this again so we can save some stories for maybe in the spring next year. Okay. We can do a revisit because we've done it with Jack Valentine this spring and last spring, the same with Whit, and it's nice that we can come back and we can sort of like poke a few more memories and a few more things that come out, because there's so much. We can't do it all in one show. It makes it really difficult to do it in one show.
There's just occurred to me that what might be puzzling some people is this behind me. I have a 32-year-old autistic son called Ludo, which people around here, they can't understand my northeastern accent, so they tend to say Ludo. No, because around here people say Ludo, and he's taken this place over. This has become his art and crafts corner in the lounge here. He's got his whole bedroom to himself in the room over here. But also things like this, you have to accept that an autistic boy likes everything in its place.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't want them moved. So we've never had the use of this lovely chair. These have always been here. Well, that's the reason for it.
I had the pleasure of meeting Ludo earlier.
Yes.
It's a very lovely man. He shook my hand as well.
He did, yes. That's lovely.
I was very, very pleased with that. Very pleased. Overall, what's been your most embarrassing moment?
When I thought I was off microphone at Donington Park World Superbikes 2007. I was rude about Tony Carter.
Oh, you were?
And he never forgave me.
No. Well, I suppose it was a bit of a relief at the end of 2013 then, wasn't it?
It was.
Yes. Move swiftly on from that one. if you could invite 3 dinner party guests to your wonderful home, 1 from sport, 1 from music, 1 from the movies, who would they be?
1 from sport, 1 from the movies. Oh, Lord, who would they be? 1 from music. Music would be Raikuda. It's one of the first one that springs to mind. Are we allowed to have people who've passed away?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, alive or past, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I should have stipulated that first.
Bob Marley might be one, who I had the pleasure of seeing live twice. He was remarkable. No, Raikuda. What about Raikuda, Frankie Killy?
And an actor or actress.
Oh, I'm not much interested in that kind of side of things. Do you know what I mean? My wife's big on watching dramas and stuff like that. Well, actually, no, not that big, but they don't particularly do it for me.
Okay, anybody you wish then?
No, my ultimate screen hero, Paul Newman.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
That would make a great evening.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt. What annoys you most in life, Jack?
Inconsideration. Yeah, and just a lack of kindness, which I'm sometimes accused of, understandably. But, just something like, I don't know, simple things. A lack of... my good lady has pointed out to me and tried to make me realise that if people show a lack of consideration in the way that they behave, there's no point in getting upset and thinking that they'll change their behaviour, because if they're inconsiderate from the outset, no amount of getting yourself heated is going to make them change their way of behaving. So inconsideration.
I'm in big agreement with that completely. When was the last time you changed your opinion on something or someone?
Jason Mohammed, who's a television presenter and does kind of Saturday afternoon football stuff on the BBC and stuff like that. And I always used to think he was a bit kind of loud, and the way you kind of describe people other than the wonderful, gracious Matt Roberts earlier. But when I did a one-off World Superbike round that Greg, for some reason, wasn't able to do. And it meant us going to Stockley Park, which has become notoriously famous because it's where they stick the VAR.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And we had to go there. And Jason Mohammed was there doing a football thing that Saturday. And it was just really delightful. And he only spoke to me really momentarily in passing, but I thought, oh, what a lovely bloke. Definitely changed my mind about him.
Excellent.
Because I think that some people can be quite lovely. Some can be really lovely when they're off air, and other people who surprise you, and you learn about it from colleagues who've, amongst our team, because remember, we've got a big team behind us when we do things like British Superbikes, and they've had the misfortune to work with someone who becomes really unpleasant the moment they come off air, when they're seeing the nicest people in the world when they're on air. And you think, wow, so people can really be like that, and be unpleasant and ruthless with the people around them.
Which is a difficult situation to find yourself in.
Yeah, actually, that day at Stockley Park, I remember the other thing that really entertained me and Matt was that John, they were doing World Snooker at the same time, and John Parrott appeared at the room that we'd been allocated, which normally full of people, football-y type people. He obviously assumed that we were football-y type people, and he started. And he's a real Evertonian, but boy, oh boy, he was really, really giving them a hard time. Really, really fucking this and fucking that. It was really entertaining. And we thought, oh, this is the real John Parrott.
It's a real John Parrott. You can see the new stadium being built over the way, can't we, for Everton?
You can see it.
You can just see it
back here or just at the front.
And I will be, just as a complete aside, I will be at Anfield on Monday night.
Oh, will you?
Yes. I'm going to watch Pink in concert.
Really?
Yes, that's my birthday present from my other half.
Do you know?
And I cannot wait.
She had the sense to marry a great American motocrosser.
Yes, she did.
Freestyle motocrosser.
Carey Hart.
Yeah. And she was boarding him at a race when she put out "Will you marry me," which I think is great.
That's the beauty of it.
He stopped straight away.
It's going to put you off your stride a little bit, isn't it? What's the one decision you'd change if you could?
Leaving Vogue magazine when I'd not that long after my art college days, I'd done a year at a small ad agency in Camden Town, above the Plaza Cinema in Camden Town, and then I went to Vogue, and I only lasted, and I was handpicked. This sounds snotty. It's not meant to be. I was handpicked from like 140 applicants for this bloody designer's job by Beatrix Miller, who is one of the legendary Vogue editors of years gone by. She's a lovely, wonderful woman, and I only lasted 6 months. I was just kind of overwhelmed, really, about the people around me. You mentioned starstruck, that kind of. There was a bit of that in it. The corridors with Norman Parkinson and Anthony Armstrong Jones and people wandering around it, and Grace Coddington. There were all these people around the place who just felt like another race to me. And I was having a hard time with a chain-smoking little woman who was, didn't look too happy to have me arrive there, and she worked in the art department as well, and she made my life not very nice, really. And I realised that it might be better to leave, and I did. And as I left, or just before I left, the art director there, Barney Wan, lovely little gentle Chinaman, he was going to leave and be replaced by an English guy who'd helped launch a rival magazine called Over 21 that a rival company had launched, and he arrived just before I left, and he was a delight, and I thought, I wish I hadn't made this decision, because I think life underneath this fellow would actually be a lot more bearable. So I wished I'd lasted a bit longer there. I was a very spotty monosyllabic kid from Billingham-on-Tees, boy from Billingham-on-Tees, and I just wished I'd been able to cope with it. It all happened too soon. If it had happened a bit later in my career, it might have been better. But there again, where on earth would that have led me? And absolutely, would this life ever have come into being? No idea. No idea.
It's a fascinating way to look at it, isn't it?
Yeah.
A very fascinating way to look at it. Who's the most famous person in your phone?
In my phone?
Yes. But you've not been asked that one before.
I think I would have to say Foggy.
Perfect.
I would have to say Foggy, because his King of the Jungle thing threw him into a whole different world.
I took a completely different plane, didn't it?
Yeah.
At that point. So yeah, I would agree. One food you could never give up.
One food I could never give up. Poached egg on toast, which is the one thing I do brilliantly, and I love it. I actually enjoy cooking stuff, and not because I do a lot of cooking for me and Ludo. We eat the same things, because it keeps him gluten free if I'm gluten free. So we work it that way.
I still struggle to do poached egg. What's your secret?
A drop of cider vinegar in the water as it's bubbling. You know, when you first get it bubbling before you drop the egg.
Do you whirlpool the water, or do you just drop the egg? Because I can never get it to wrap around like we have in our local cafe.
No, that little drop of vinegar, and then just give it a little to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom, and then it'll look after itself.
Thank you, Jack. I will try. So
by the way,
my biggest problem in life.
I've just realised, most famous person in my phone book, I've got to put McGinley in there, John McGuinness. Otherwise, he might get annoyed with me.
What an incredible man! We had him. I was with him at Donington Park. Just a delight to be.
Yes, yeah.
To be with. When you get a chance, I think I know the answer to this one. I think you've already answered it inadvertently another way. Driving home from a gig from Eurosport, from wherever, you're in the car, stereo's up to 11, seats back, windows down. What are you listening to? Braikuda, potentially.
Possibly. Stan Burnicle. I'm still blessed to have some wonderful stuff of my dad's music. My dad was a genius musician and very, very Asperger's syndrome. Not a wonderful dad, but an amazing musician. Very early Rod Stewart and the Faces, the Beatles even. What else would I be listening to? What else have I got in there? In the car at the moment, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes, who are a wonderful band who were good mates with Bruce Springsteen.
That's him.
That's him.
The big influence on my favourite singer/musician, John Bon Jovi.
Yeah.
He was big friends with Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, they were his inspiration through Asbury Park.
Yes.
Through the fast lane and through all the on the boardwalk, and that they were his big inspiration when he was in his late teens and early 20s.
I didn't know that. They're a great band. Great band.
What superstitions do you have?
I don't think I have any. Do you have to have superstitions?
Nope, not at all. Not in the slightest.
I'm not sure that I have one. Possibly not walking under a ladder, but that seems.
I'm kind of that
doesn't even bother me.
It's just the thought of it.
I don't think I have any superstitions, to be honest. It never occurred to me.
The only thing that's now turned into a superstition, for me, is the only hangover I have from 2020, 2021. I still wear a glove at a petrol pump. Weirdly. Anything else, I don't care. I'll shake hands, I'll hug people, I'll push doors open. Yeah. But weirdly, the one thing I can't get out of my head, and I have an unleaded car, I don't even need to wear a glove. It's just the one thing I can't shake off.
I always prefer to do that because I have a diesel motor.
Yes.
You know? I have a crappy little diesel motor. I have to play that U-less charge on every time I go down.
Of course,
go down to Chiswick.
Oh, £15 a time?
No, 12 and a half, 25 quid because I'm across 2 days. I arrive on the Saturday and depart on the Sunday night.
Oh, of course. So I made a large mistake. So I'm not being rude with my phone. I have a couple of questions on my phone. I made the mistake. I came through the Kingsway Tunnel.
Yeah.
And I picked the wrong lane.
Yes.
There's a T lane and there's a regular lane.
Yes.
And I found myself in the T lane, stopped. And I went to pay and it's like,
oh yes.
Oh, help.
Yes. Yeah.
People reversing out from behind me, shaking their head. It's like, I had no idea.
Who's this goon?
You're not from around here, are you? No. I'll remember next time to go through the one that's blue, because now I just thought it was something like the Runcorn Bridge or Dartford Crossing.
You've got to select the right.
You have to select the right. I remember that next time.
To get fleeced for a couple of quid.
Yes, £2.60 or something daft that it is. We're very fortunate to have a Patreon page where people subscribe to our Patreon page. They get early access to the shows, and if they pick one of the upper tiers, they get a chance to ask questions as well of the guests. We let them know in advance who's coming on. So if anybody watching wants to join our Patreon page, click more on the description under the video, and that will give you the links to Patreon and to our merch as well.
Do you know what? I'm I need a wee.
As we said, with our patrons, Geralt Ellis, has Jack ever had the itch to go racing? And if you would have a go at any, what discipline would it be?
I've had a couple of hilarious outings as a kind of elderly motocrosser, and I might have fancied a little bit of dirt riding. Yes, I think that would be my most comfortable avenue in. I think I'd be a bit too fearful of road racing, to be honest. I think I don't take well to being hurt, and some of these guys, boy oh boy, you know, your Leon Haslams, boy, they can ride with all sorts of discomfort. You know, I think it's amazing, quite amazing.
Yes, my pain threshold doesn't quite go.
No, exactly. No, mine too.
That's why I do this. Another great friend of ours, Mick Strickland. Jack's been around motorcycles for years in many shapes and forms, but who do you see as our next emerging British talents coming through in motocross, speedway and BSB?
Whoa. Do you know, in the sad truth about motocross is it's a really hard move to make from Great Britain and our isolated little island into Grand Prix without the right kind of backing and the right kind of people picking you up. And I can't see anybody in there at the moment at all, to be honest. And I think you would have a better idea of what youth there is that you are seeing regularly in the British Superbike paddock, for example, that might be, because that's the place you've got to look at, isn't it? It might be young enough to contemplate that. You said that Max Cook's a lovely kid and he's been getting some good results. So perhaps he might be an option.
I think it's difficult to see who, because the classes are changing so much, especially over this year, and I think over the next few years, we're going to the lines are going to be blurred a little bit. Eduardo Colombi, the Italian that's come across, that's giving Coops a run for his money in the Sport Bike Championship. He's a super talent, but he's Italian. But some of the younger ones coming through in super teens, Leon's put the Rocket Rookies together.
Yeah.
There's some big talents in there like Harry Cook and Chloe Jones, riders of their standard. But since they changed the British Talent Cup that you commentated on, with Josh, Rory, Scott, Thomas Strudwick, and Max Cook, then Franco Bourne, Casey O'Gorman, Eddie O'Shea.
Casey O'Gorman was shaky. Really had him down as a hot prospect, didn't he?
He did. He left us. Something went on behind the scenes there that means that unfortunately that relationship didn't continue.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, your Casey O'Gormans and your Eddie O'Shea's, I think for me, for road racing, they're the next step. I don't think Scott and Josh.
What's Casey O'Gorman doing now?
He's in the Monlau umbrella now. He's in the Australia Galicia under, what's his name? He was with Marc Marquez. I can see his face. The ex-racer, not... good grief, what's his name? Not Alberto Puig, the other one.
So he's being looked after.
So he's being looked after,
on the international stage.
Yes, I'm going to get halfway home, and his name will come to me. So he's in that setup now, and Eddie O'Shea's in the junior talent team with MLav, and I think Manuel Brinton. So they're the next ones to come through. There's nobody really been there to push Josh and Scott in Moto3 because of the age change.
Yes.
That helped both of those have...
What do you mean the age change?
You have to be 18 now to compete in Moto3.
You have to be 18
yes.
to compete in Moto3?
Yeah, where it was 16, I think, previously.
It was 16, yeah.
Which then, the age gap between Scott and Josh and Casey and Eddie meant they had to wait 2 years.
Yes.
So they haven't been able to make that step forward. So it was kind of a free year last year for Scott and Josh because there was no challenge.
Yeah.
So we'll see where they end up. And obviously Jake Dixon out there as well, isn't he? it's difficult to see. And as we said about swapping from BSB to Worlds, with those that are being ejected from Moto2 and MotoGP making their way to World Superbikes now, your Remy Gardners and people like that.
Yes.
They're not going to be looking at national level riders to fill those gaps as they were, as we spoke about 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So I find it difficult for everybody at the moment. And again, as you said, with the motocross, unless you go with 300,000 euros to a team, and there's no money in the UK for somebody to take 300,000 euros to Spain to run in Sev, where am I going to watch it? I haven't got BT Sport. Yeah. Well, that's where it is.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult situation, I think, at the minute for younger riders. World level loss is our gain. We get to keep Max. We get to keep Spud.
Yes.
We get to keep Rory for now.
Yeah.
And we might see Brad return. I don't think we'll see Scott Redding come back. He's too bothered with his push bikes now.
With his push bike?
Yeah, he's a national level cyclist.
Oh, right.
He's incredible. And the team that he runs with his Scott Redding team that he has, that's his biggest focus. I think racing's become more of a job now than a career.
He was brilliant at our World Vets motocross at Farley Castle last August. Yeah. It really got at least a top 5 finish at one point in riding a 125 Fantic. Yeah, he was
fabulous.
And he also had a retro 250 Honda as well. Yeah, he was proper class.
Did Stalker come down?
That's where he started life.
Yes, absolutely. Did Stalker come down?
No,
because wasn't he twin shock world champion not too long ago? Do I remember?
I don't know whether they have such a thing.
It goes down to his age again, doesn't it? The last twin shock world champion. We'll see about that.
He finished top 12 in the Western Beach race, bless him, and that was quite an achievement.
That's an achievement in itself, isn't it? Yeah. In a big way. That's an incredible event. The last question to finish off. And thank you, Jack. This has been absolutely fascinating. It's been wonderful to spend a couple of hours
with you. It doesn't feel it. I'm sorry. I should apologise to your viewers on that score.
I did tell you they were looking forward to it. You may have more than one of these stories, but what's your best hire car story?
Hire car story? Didn't feel like the best at the time. I can't remember which Magny Core. The Magny Core comes into things an awful lot.
It does.
Magny Core because it was so often the last round. It was the last round of World Superbikes. I think it might be the one where Biaggi edged out Tom by half a point. So that would have been 2012, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And Whitham got absolutely arsehole the night before at the big party and stuff that was going on, because I'm not much of a drinker. No. So, in fact, I've been off alcohol for literally all this year. And the next morning, I mean, having managed to get him back to the hotel, but the next morning, I had to get him to Lyon Airport, and we hadn't put me down as a driver. And he was not in a fit state to drive. He just wasn't in it. We had to set off early from that lovely hotel that's right bang on the track, near the track. And so I drove the car. He was woozy in the passenger seat, and we'd only gone a couple of miles, and he had to ask me to stop. And while he threw up outside the door, opened the door and threw up, and then from then on he was just unconscious. And I remember being flashed by a camera when I was part way to the airport, and just thinking, oh no, this is going to come. We're now going to get done for speeding, and I really was haunted by that until I got to the airport. It was just not a fun drive. It wasn't a fun drive, because I remembered when we'd once had to rush someone back to Schiphol Airport from Assen.
That's a good couple of hours.
Yeah. not the way that Whit was driving that day, but and then I got over a grand's worth, because the car was under my name. I got over a grand's worth of fines coming through the front door, and my dear lady was saying, "What the heck is on? What's all this about?" And Whit and James, bless his heart, he paid them, and I sent them to him, and he blooming well paid them, which is very decent of him. And they'd all come in a short space of time when there'd been kind of reddish roadworks and things going on, and the speed limits had been on and off and on and off, and he just hit them all at the same time. But that drive down to Lyon it should have been a pleasant Monday morning jaunt, but it didn't feel like it at the time because I was not supposed to be behind the wheel.
No, and you kind of.
And I'm not. Motorcycle racers are remarkable people. They're very independent, willful, and they can look after themselves. And they probably, if he'd been in that position, he wouldn't have been
one thought twice.
Whereas I wasn't. I'm not like that.
I was going to say you drive
nervous.
To it then, don't you? And you tense when you're driving because you know
that if you do anything wrong, it could really rebound on you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would be exactly the same. Jack, thank you. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I know the listeners and the viewers will thoroughly enjoy this, and I'll send you the feedback that we get. There's so many people have been looking forward to this, and there's no better way to spend a Wednesday afternoon.
It has been
It's been glorious, hasn't it?
Yes.
We've got a glorious drive home now.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Burnicle.
Bye-bye.